Hello, welcome back. We are still looking at International Women's Day and turning it into International Women's Month. And today I'm talking to my amazing friend Carol. I'm super excited about this. The theme for International Women's Day this year is Inspire Inclusion. And so my goal is to talk to 31 of the most inspiring women and to hear about their lives and their stories. They're all from different walks of life. And Carol is one of the people that I immediately came to my mind when I was planning to do this. So Carol, tell us about you.
Thank you, Leah. So wonderful to be here, especially for this a series that you're doing. Carol Lwali. I'm a wife. I'm a sister, a daughter, and I work in higher education. I have a couple of degrees under my belt. And right now, I really love my job where I work as the director of career engagement in Seattle. So, really happy to be here.
Amazing. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to have you. Carol and I know each other. We have a fun story. Carol and her husband had moved to the Seattle area from New Mexico, and I had been in New Mexico, and we have a mutual friend, our friend Nancy. Hi, Nancy, if you're watching. Our friend Nancy was a mutual friend, and when I was moving actually from Denver to Seattle, she was like, I have this friend. You need to meet her. And I was like, okay. And it was amazing to me that we lived in New Mexico and never met, which is super funny because we ran in circles that overlapped, right? But we hadn't met. And so I moved to Seattle. We went to the movies, and that was all she wrote. We were we were friends. That's it. We were friends. That's how I see it. What do you say?
Yes, Nancy's definitely the connector here. And I just love when friends sort of pair you with others, like, I'm going to find you a friend.
Yeah,
And so,
you
yes,
need one, right?
yeah.
So
And after that, we joined a couple of groups. I remember the Seattle Child Free Women's Group, the meetup group, and yeah, we continue to connect that way and beyond. So
yeah,
yeah.
it's been so much fun. It's been really fun to have that connection from Nancy, but then also have other ways that we connected. And now we share lots of little friend groups because we've made, here, come to this, meet this friend, meet that friend. So it's been a lot of fun. So I'm always
Absolutely.
excited to go to Seattle because I know Carol will come see me when I go visit. So so I know that she'll come see me wherever I'm happen to be in the city. So I always love that. So, we're going to dive in and talk a little bit about your journey. I would love for you to give people a flavor of, how you got to where you are today, in your walk.
Yes, it's a long journey in many different ways. I was born and raised in Nairobi, Kenya. And, as a young person, I don't know if I knew I would end up in America in Seattle, where I am right now. Um, one of the things is education was really important in our family. My parents really insisted that if you're going to do anything, it's just kind of the culture that you have to get an education. And uh, through high school, that's like focus on your studies, that kind of thing. Um, and then deciding what to do. And I was actually one of those folks who was like, oh my gosh, I'm not really sure exactly what I want to do. I thought I wanted to be a psychologist. I thought I wanted to be a nurse. I had all kinds of things
Sure.
in nutritionist. I thought of all kinds of things.
Right.
And interesting enough, I had a choice to study abroad, to get my college degree. And I was considering going to the UK or going to the US. But I felt going to the UK, I'd be so confined to my whatever program I was admitted into.
Yep.
And something in me just told me, I don't know if I would survive that. I wasn't really a great student. And so I had a lot of anxiety about this. Um, and I'll even talk about this later if the opportunity comes up, is like, I was never really a good student. So there was like high pressure. I ended up going to saying, let me go to the US, where I felt like there was a little more flexibility in figuring out your path, because it wouldn't be so confining. I generally said I would do business. And that's because, you know, it's a generalist degree in
Yeah.
some ways. And that's how I ended up in the US as an international student, earned my degree, started working, getting married. At some point, I became a US citizen, you know, all those kinds of things. And, you know, and the irony of ironies is I've ended up in Seattle and I'm working in higher education. For someone who was not a good student, oh my gosh, this is a path I would not have foreseen for myself.
Come to me, students, and I'll tell you what it's like to not be a good student.
No, it's, and when I think about even just growing up, like I I feel like some ways the way the education systems were set up is I was not meant to succeed, you know. I was
Mhm.
not meant to be a person who is working in an educational setting. First of all, I hated it, but I think a lot of it was shaped by the experiences I was having because I just found it so difficult to study and be excellent because there was an expectation of excellence.
Yeah.
If you know, and I tell people I'm a B student, and I don't mean it by business student. I was just
Right.
average
Right.
B's.
Just it wasn't quite average, but it wasn't quite an A student. Yeah, I get that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so and then now you know, I ended up having two master's degree, an MBA and a degree in counseling. And so I'm here in Seattle and working in career services essentially, which has marries a lot of strength that I feel like I have. You know, so I've utilized all my degrees in some
Yeah.
sense. I
So
just didn't envision it to be this way.
right, which is I think often when we're getting degrees, we have this mindset. Like I remember I had an accounting degree, and at the end of it being like, I'm going to be a terrible accountant. I don't think I know how to do this, right? Because you don't what you learn is not what you do, right?
Right.
And so then you start doing the job and you're like, oh, okay, I can do this, right? And then I stopped using my accounting degree 3 years into my career. Like I became a product manager. But my accounting degree has shown up in every because I need to know how to follow money. I need,
Right.
business. So it's amazing how what starts out as like, this is the thing I'm going to do becomes like, this is the thing I'm going to use. Right. Like
Right.
it's not going to be the thing I do. It's going to be the thing I use.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that really resonates what you just said. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I would love to talk a little bit about, you and I have talked a little bit about this in the past, but I would love to talk a little bit about really this concept of kind of intersectionality, right? So we're talking about International Women's Day, as a woman, as a person of color in the US, right? As an immigrant who has moved and then become a citizen, what are some ways that those elements of who you are have created a challenge or been a challenge to everyday life or meeting goals, and really how has that shown up?
Yeah, you know, it's complicated in many ways. I remember arriving here in the US, and first of all, you know, you're an immigrant, so you're a foreigner, and there's all these sort of like stereotypes about being a foreigner or an immigrant and things like that. And so you're trying to navigate that because there's things like people hear your accent and immediately assume that you're not intelligent, which is really interesting, especially accents from Africa.
Sure. Sure.
Then people see you as a woman and they're like, you know, I just don't know what to do with a Black woman, you know, those kinds of aspects.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like when arriving in the US was one of the first places where I was constantly being asked what race or ethnicity I am. Every single piece of paperwork involved that. And I tell people I really did not know I was Black until I arrived in this country because it constantly is being, you know, put in front of me. And I don't mean that I didn't know I was Black. I mean, and I came from a predominantly Black country.
Mhm.
You know, Black was the predominant race, you
Right.
know. And so when you arrive here, you're suddenly different. You are in marginalized race, and you're in a member of a community where resources are not as easily accessible or available to you the way you would expect. So there was a lot of changes in terms of you can't just take things for granted. They're not easily ready there. And then there's always the questioning of or the some of it is based in grounded in bias, or the questioning of, are you really capable of this? You know, even in, say, for example, with in college and things like that, there's a lot of perceptions that I got there because I was Black, maybe due to, say, affirmative action, which was, but people don't even realize I wasn't even eligible as for affirmative action sort of decisions, being an international student at the time. But people don't see the nuances and complexities behind those kinds of things. So it felt very like I was always kind of having to fight that I'm valid, I'm human, I'm capable of all these things. The expectations are different, and now that's the early part. And then as you continue to grow and say, like in my career and things like that, I was finding that sometimes either people are getting promoted ahead, and we're like, I would look and see I graduated with sets of people, and I'm seeing like as though some of my peers are going ahead of me than I am. And I'm like, what's going on here? Or I would be, in like performance reviews, there's like, doing great, but maybe need some more experience in it. And I'm like, how much more experience?
Right,
You
right.
know, you know, or
Does
and
that guy
then
have
so
enough?
then
Because he seems like he's getting promoted and he doesn't have very much, right?
right, exactly. Or just a lot of second guessing, so questioning, not enough, you're not quite ready. That was often a bit some of the uh feedback I used to receive a lot. You're not quite ready. And I'm like, okay, so give me the experiences that will allow me to be ready for these things. But also internally, I was constantly also like comparing myself, like I said, comparing my classmates, the people I graduated with, and thinking, how come they're so far ahead? Why am I stuck here? And so I also had to start uh, realizing it's not me, right? It's not me. It's not a me problem.
Nope.
And I'm not going to be responsible for other people's biases against me and things like that. But I have to sit and do what's best for me,
Right.
in my own knowledge that I know I'm capable, I know that I'm enough. And I think those are some of the things that face a lot of women of color, international women, wherever we are. It's just societal expectations. You expect it to be everything, but you're never enough.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think that
Yeah.
makes total sense. Thanks for sharing that. It's really interesting as you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking like, I recognize certainly like living in Germany and leading an international team, like hiring an international team that was literally from all over the world. I had a team of 70 people who spoke 28 languages, right? 3 Germans, like everyone else was from somewhere else, like everywhere. But what I recognized in those moments was my age and my experience bought me some privilege. My whiteness bought me some privilege, and my American passport bought me some privilege. And so when other people would talk about their expat experience, I would be like, I haven't really had that experience, right? I've had rough experiences, and I've certainly been a woman in a man's tech world, and I've experienced being held back, but I think the reason I want to say that is we each have to look at our scenario and our specific environment and say that is not the definition of everyone's situation.
Right.
And sometimes even the experience I'm having that I think that's not fair is not even the most unfair, right? It's
Yeah.
unfair, but if you then look and go, wait a minute, that's way more unfair than my situation, right? So
Right.
if I say to the women that I'm coaching, like, a lot of times middle-aged white men, they basically were born on third base, right? They're on their way to home plate, right?
Right.
I have to also recognize that I wasn't born on first base,
Yes.
right? Like let's be fair. If we're talking bases, I'm somewhere on first or second base. I'm certainly not at home plate hitting, right?
Right.
And I think that there's an element of that recognition. The only way I really believe that we can lift while we rise is if we recognize our own privilege and our own, like how much education I have, how much this, how much that. So without having to diminish myself, being able to say, oh, there's more, there's more out there than just my story, right? Which is part of the reason
Yeah.
I'm doing this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, and recognizing privilege is really important because also, as I have continued now that I do have an American passport and things like that, it has definitely afforded me different kinds of privileges that I didn't have previously. I work with a lot of international students, for example, and I always have to remember my time was so different from what they're experiencing right now. Even though I had that experience as an international student in the past, things have changed so much. And also, I am now in a different set of shoes um, but I have to think about how best to help them navigate this system that we're in and all of that. So absolutely privileges, and understanding your privilege, positionality, all of those matter.
They do. They really do. And I'm glad you pointed that out because I really do. I see that more and more. And it makes me, when I have a tendency to say, like, oh, this is how women are treated, I'm like, wait a minute. If that's a generic statement about women, now let's talk about women of color. Let's talk about women, with different gender identities. Like where are we? Right. And
Yes,
ages, right? My age at 48 versus a 22-year-old. What's the difference in our privileges? At what point will I tip over into ageism where I don't have opportunity in some way, so there's a whole spectrum of things that we have to consider. And I think that's why each story it's important to hear, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
So I would love to hear what you think are sort of the issues, some of maybe we're talking about, but the issues that are facing women and girls today that we must tackle, we must solve, we must really pay attention to.
You know, it's some ways so disappointing that I feel like we're talking about the same issues we were talking about 30 years ago, 60 years ago, and they're cropping up again. And it's like, have we not learned anything? But the one issue I wanted to really focus on maybe is the superwoman syndrome. That's kind of what I look at it.
Yeah, yeah,
The one where you just tell yourself, I got this, I will handle it. You have to put forward a position of strength. You got it, and everything's okay.
yeah,
Putting other people's needs in front of your own needs
yeah,
is a part of that. Obligations to others and things, and denying yourself,
yeah.
lack of asking for help, all of that. This is what I call superwoman syndrome,
Yes. Yeah.
all those things tied in there, and still be okay, like act like you're okay. So you're also masking your own needs, wants, desires, ambitions, all of those kinds of things. And it's it hurts women in many ways. We cannot be vulnerable. We cannot be seen as needing support and help. So those are the things I wish, young women today would be able to, that I would be able to tell them, it's okay. You don't need to be strong, and even maybe we should focus on some of the ways we address things like certain emotions or ways of women are, like for example, are we angry or are we determined? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can we use different language to talk about some of these things?
Yeah.
um you know even on an aspect such as, like, sometimes someone can be seen as kind and seen as though that's a weakness, instead of being seen as reflective, or or sometimes if you're kind, people think, oh, she's gullible
Yeah.
or that kind of thing,
Naive or yeah, pushover.
or
Yeah.
naive
Yeah.
or those kinds of things.
Yeah.
If you're ambitious, you are seen as selfish.
Yeah.
It's as though you don't have choices. Even speaking of being a woman, one of the biggest identities of being a woman often is the childbearing things, but we should be okay with being childless and even making the conscious decision to be, I don't want to bear children.
Right.
But some people don't have a choice. That is just the way uh, uh, the life has dealt you, that your body or whatever it is has dealt you to be that way. And there are also many other ways of becoming a child without actually birthing a child.
Right.
So all of these things, I feel we're constantly fighting them. And I think they're not new things that we're fighting, but what are we doing to make it better for the next generation of women, um, um, to be able to exercise these choices, and fully embody all the different ways of being a woman. So, yeah.
No, I love that. I'm glad you pointed that out because I do think that we sort of draw a box and say these are the acceptable ways of being. These are outliers and they're not acceptable, when really the whole spectrum is acceptable.
Yeah.
If you are, if you choose to be without, choose to be child free, if you can't have children, if you want to have a bunch, awesome, right? Like, what does that look like? And how do we say there's room for all of it? And that's just one element, right? Like you said, but I love what you said, because I think that across my career working with men primarily, I learned how to put a cape on and go into heroics, right? Like, I will save the day, right? And I'm like, I'm not really interested in that. I don't really want to. Like, I'm happy to participate in saving the day. I'm happy to jump in and do my part. I'm happy to lead the way, but I don't want to do heroics for everyone else and never pay attention to me anymore. And I want young women not to think that that's what they have to do.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I
Yeah,
mean,
be the hero, but also at the same time, you're expected to nurture and clean up and everything and take care of everybody's needs, even in the office.
yes.
It's just not at home when you're out and about socially. It's happening at work, it's happening at home, it's happening in so many different environments and spheres that we belong to. But yeah, you don't have to wear normalize wanting things for yourself,
Right.
normalize wanting a soft life,
Yeah.
normalize being like, today's going to be a do nothing day.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
those dishes, somebody else can come clean them up.
Right.
They don't need to be cleaned right now. You don't have to have a perfectly, neat house and everything. It's okay that the socks are under the table or
Yes.
whatever,
Yeah. Yeah. A friend of mine recently said that that a clean house is not a statement of morality.
Right.
Like, we have made it sort of like, well, if your house is messy, you're a mess, you're a bad person. And it's like, it's not, having a perfectly clean house is not a statement of morality. It's just
No.
a clean house. Right? Like,
It's just
you're
a
not a
clean
bad
house.
person because your socks are under the table or your shoes are piled up by the door or whatever. Like, and I think we as women, we take on issues that are even not like, okay, don't just don't take it on.
Right.
Like,
It's not your personality. It's not your character. It's not. It's none of those things.
we got bigger fish to fry than
Yeah.
So last question, if you were giving younger Carol some advice that you think might be pertinent to the women and girls that are watching this, what would you tell her?
Oh, wow. This is a good one. There are no medals to the Suffering Olympics.
I love it. Say more.
Because again, part of the expectations and we are living on other people's expectations other than our own.
Yeah.
And so you will be there dying to please someone else and again denying your own needs. And that is unhealthy in so many different ways. And you'll end up being resentful. You'll end up being angry. You're really spending too much time worrying about others, and they're not even thinking about you.
Nope.
I think for me, when I realized that moment that I was really like, think about this, and I was like, this person is going on through their whole lives. You did not even cross their mind.
Right.
And here you think you are doing these acts of service, and I'm not talking about love language type things. I'm
Oh.
just like, you think you're doing all these things that so that you can be appreciated more and all of these kinds of things. No,
Mhm.
that's not going to work. Allow yourself, give yourself lots of grace, allow yourself to, you know, tend to yourself. And if you're a nurturer, that's okay too, but you cannot really water out of an empty well. You
Yeah.
just couldn't. So
No.
take care of yourself and remember that you're always enough. You are enough in so many different ways. And even if it means writing a reminder like you are enough, or affirmation every day or something like that, that's really helpful to remind you that um, you don't have to suffer every day. And that doesn't make you less, or more than, or add to you. Just the way you are is great.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I think younger Carol would have loved that advice.
I I know, I know.
I
And
love
oh, maybe there might even be one more thing I'd add to that is women friendships are also important.
Oh, so
Yeah.
important.
Healthy women friendships, because there could be some that are a bit toxic,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
healthy women friendships are also important too.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot about, I mean, I have some men that I love, and when I do International Men's Day in the same way, I think those men will come forward and everybody will be like, "Oh, look at all these men that she has in her life that she loves." But my female relationships have sustained me
Yeah,
when I wasn't sure I could keep my head above water, right?
absolutely.
And I think about those and I think, oof, I don't know what would we do without our girlfriends, right? So, and I don't
Yes.
want to find out, right? Well, Carol, thank you so much for joining me, for being my girlfriend, and for sustaining me when I needed sustaining, and for coming and talking to me today about this. This was so much fun.
Yes, this has been lovely. I've totally enjoyed it. And thank you for doing this series. I'm excited, and happy International Women's Day and Women's Month.
That's right. That's right. For those of you who are watching, if you would like to give some money to the Malala Fund supports the education of women and girls, often in remote areas where they have historically not been afforded education, but they also support making sure that women who want a STEM education or want education in spaces that will give them further opportunity are also able to get that. So if you would like to donate, please do. There's a QR code in the corner, and you can donate. And at the end of the month, we'll make a donation to the Malala Fund. So, Carol, thank you so much, and we'll be seeing you soon.